welcome back to another Cardinals Off Day podcast. We've got a short turnaround on off days here, and so we're very excited to be doing a little bit of a special episode. So with me is my good friend Ben Humphrey, as always, but joining us as well, friend of the pod, I think officially our most frequent guest at this point, Kyle Reis. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad that there's been so many off days that there's nothing left to talk about, that you guys can usher me onto the program. Thank you.
In all seriousness, Kyle, this offseason, we did one of the most professional things we have ever done. We did like a listener survey. We just kind of asked people to like tell us some things. And I think the two most common comments we got were, you should have Kyle on more and you should talk more about the minor leagues, which basically are two versions of the same thing. So
well, it's nice to know that there's some carryover in the deranged fans from podcast to podcast.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, they're fanatics for a reason, right? And nothing gets folks' backup quarterback mindset going more than talking prospects. So it's like wishing on a star.
Ben, it's so funny. I've been thinking about you so much lately about the football, both of you guys, about the football mentality. The football mentality of fandom, especially as the Cardinals have been very aggressive about telling everybody that there's runway, and they're going to put guys in situations that might not give them the best chance to win, but gives those guys the best chance to develop. And just thinking about that, and your outlook on that, it like echoes in my head every day now. Yeah, as every game passes and the Cardinals work through some tough things and come out with wins and come out with losses, it just, man, I love that you went straight to the football analogy with the Monday morning quarterbacking, looking for the next best backup quarterback to be supplanted by the next best backup quarterback. So I thank you for that. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, well, and I've got questions about layers and layers of backup quarterbacks that the Cardinals have. So
awesome.
Yes. So no, we're definitely looking forward to talking some specific prospects, and I think interested in hearing your thoughts on some of these guys that are in the major leagues with runway, and you have such so much more kind of background on what their minor league was like. But I think before we get into that, we kind of wanted to just talk with you a little bit about the transformations that we know are going on kind of in player development land. And Dan, our good friend, who Kyle, as well, and we've hung out with, Dan actually kind of wrote up a question related to that. So I'm just going to read that real quick. He said, in a recent interview, Rob Cerfolio said that he frequently texts with minor league pitchers like Matthews, McGreevy, Swanson, and others. And those players said they credit recent success to those conversations. With Bloom coming in and people like Cerfolio, Larry Day, Carl Kachan, etc. in the mix, he's showing off how many people he can name at this point.
Wow.
I don't know who half these people are, I'm going to be honest. How do you see communications like this happening in the future? How are Marmol, Brown, and Blake involved? Or do you think success will come from just having more communications compared to a few years ago when these positions didn't even exist?
Yeah, that communication. Entering the year, the Cardinals were very vocal about saying communication. That was going to be the first big change. And it's not to trash on the old regime. I think that it's easy to think, oh, the old regime wasn't communicating. It was just a different kind of communication. It was an old style communication. It was a type of communication, a level of communication from level to level, player to player, coach to player, etc. That was old. It had run its course, especially in the modern game. So I do think that they've begun to manifest these changes, and it is all based on communication. That article in the Post-Dispatch was perfect. It was a perfect microcosm of, how are they getting the most out of Gordon Graceffo? Sure, Chris Roycroft is back in the minors, but through communication, telling them how they're going to get to the majors. And not just those guys, reaching down and talking to Tekoa Roby, working, basically pulling Tink Hence away for the first month of the minor league season to work on his mechanics and to work on his pitch design, even though he's still having some nasty returns. These are the things that have really pushed the players to the next level, I think. When everybody is communicating, when they all know that, all right, look, we're going to be aggressive on the base pass. All right, look, we're going to take good at bats. Yeah, it allows everybody a chance to bring out the best in themselves. And I definitely think, the little bit I know is that both Mr. Brown and Mr. Blake are working hand in hand with Mr. Pierpont and Mr. Hammett and Mr. Steinhorn to engineer this. Dusty Blake is not like we've had with prior pitching coaches at the major league level. He's not removed from what's going on in the minors. He's taking that extra time to work with Matt Pierpont to mold these guys, to have a plan for them about how to get them to the majors, and the same on the hitting side. So everybody's involved. Everybody's involved, and with the express purpose of trying to get these guys to the majors and cycle out. If they, like with Chris Roycroft, look, Chris, this is what you need to do. This is what we asked you to do. You did this. We know now, after watching you at the majors again, we send you back down. This is what you have to work on now. If you want to get back to the majors, continue that other thing and work on this next thing. And if you have any questions, we're here. The minor league coaches are in better position. So the communication, as I ramble on and talk, the communication is at an all-time high level, is my understanding. And that's not just from maybe the people that are new to the organization that I've had the privilege of talking to behind the scenes, but some of the players I've talked to behind the scenes that seem to really be bought into this, much like the St. Louis Cardinals are with Brant Brown and Dusty Blake right now.
Yeah. Oh, sounds good. Ben, do you have anything else on kind of communication and player development?
It sounds like, and this is something that we have touched on, but I think it has sort of come into focus listening to Kyle talk now, that we've talked about it. Dylan Carlson just had a good game a couple games ago, but we talked about it with Dylan Carlson, and one of the points that we have made is, like, Dylan Carlson wasn't a player development problem until after his rookie year in the major leagues, and that it seems that there was sort of this artificial boundary where it's, player development is over because you're now in the majors, but now you need to make adjustments. Well, but what is player development as a major leaguer except making adjustments? And what is player development as a minor leaguer except making adjustments? And I think listening now, it seems as if they are kind of removing that artificial boundary and having this just be an organizational wide thing of helping folks improve.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And I think that this is something, I think that's how it used to be in the organization. I think that there was a time when Mozeliak became the GM, and prior to when he became the GM, granted there was some blowback with Jocketty, but like this was kind of what they wanted, and they had it, and then they lost some good player development people. And then that got lost in the shuffle as well. So I think that it is kind of like reverting back to that exactly. Like, let's have everybody driving in the same direction, and let's all be humble enough to remember when we get to the majors, when we reach the ultimate goal, that development is needed. It's always adjusting, and that failure is only the next challenge. I do think a lot of times Dylan Carlson's a perfect example for me, because Dylan also dealt with some wrist and some ankle issues that kind of hurt his ability to have the lower half. But I do think, and as somebody who has been very candid about my desire to get rid of Turner Ward for like 2 years now, I do think that under a different circumstance, he might have been able to get more out of himself than he did, but he didn't, and now he's having success against the Cardinals for Baltimore, and that'll probably be the only time all year. So I think that you're right. I think that this particular circumstance is especially good for young players, and not just because of the runway. It's good for young players because it shows you that every day is about getting better at the sport, and if you fail, then we're going to have a plan for you, and it's not an overwhelming plan, just a plan to maximize what you're doing so that you can learn easiest and apply what you've learned. So yeah, I think that's very well articulated, a very great and astute observation that seems to be echoing throughout the organization.
Well, and something Ben and I have kind of talked about as well is just the idea that, player development, I think we know that the Cardinals were having struggles there. We certainly saw that they weren't having the kind of success that other organizations were having, and so we knew there was something kind of systemic that was a problem, but at the same time, it is always individual, and also there's just guys that they get to a certain level and they don't have it, and that's always been the case, and it always will be. So I wonder, as some of these guys who are, in the minor leagues now and working with this sort of new regime with the better communication and stuff, as some of them start to kind of matriculate up to the majors, Kyle, what's something that you think we will see that will tell us, oh yeah, a shift has happened and this player development is more successful now, as opposed to just kind of the crapshoot of, some guys have it and some guys don't?
Well, I think the first thing we're going to keep an eye on is some of the pitchers that come up. Granted, the Cardinals have had a terrible amount of pitching injuries at the minor league level. Not only Quinn Matthews, but everybody, all like their top, of their top 10 starting pitchers in the organization, like 3 of them have been healthy all year. Eshawn Henderson at Double-A, Tekoa Roby at Double-A, and that's it, basically. Yeah. So 2, I guess if you want to include Pete Hansen or Bryson Mounts, but like they have not had health. But I think you'll start to see as those guys come up to the majors, and again as they go into the majors, maybe go back down to the minors, and you start to see them adjust and work on the things that we see as fans. When we analyze Baseball Savant and see that the pitching data is off. When those guys get to the majors and then they go back down to the minors and then adjust and then go back to the majors, I think that's when you'll start to like really see it. I think we saw it with Chris Roycroft already, although he's back in the minors. We saw it with Gordon Graceffo. They found a key adjustment to get him into velocity, and here he is as an important part of the Cardinals bullpen. I think we've already seen it. Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, sure, the returns haven't been great, but what did they do? They talked about runway, and the runway was just not getting sent down to the minors. Both of those guys have been held out of the lineup quite frequently, and it was to work on things, to continue to develop at the major league level, which is the thing that they've sucked at. They've been terrible at. Whatever their version of Save-A-Lot soda is the lowest brand of Save-A-Lot soda. That's the brand that the player development has been at the major league level. So yeah, I think that we're starting to see it with being patient, understanding, and continuing to learn. I think with pitchers, we'll see the data change. We've already seen Tekoa Roby's fastball get a little different. We've seen a lot of pitchers add cutters, be more selective with using changeups at the minor league level. Well, that'll probably continue to the major league level. And I think with hitters, it's always going to be a little bit more difficult. And it's just because the talent level is just so far away from hitters and pitchers. The pitching is just so developed. You're not going to, especially in June, 2 months into the season, you're not going to see very many major league caliber starting pitchers at the minor league level. All those guys are in the majors. So I'm not quite sure if and when we'll see it at the major league level, or how it will manifest at the major league level, or what to look for. I just know that I just feel confident that it'll be how they adjust more than how they arrive, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I love your answer there, that it's kind of, you see them, make a debut, go back down, and then when they come back, there has been a change. That makes a lot of sense to me. It's not just kind of, do they have it or don't they? It's, you're kind of seeing an adjustment. And yeah, if you're seeing an adjustment, that makes a lot of sense that's kind of coming out of that player development. And then just, since you did mention Walker and Gorman, maybe we can just kind of segue into talking a little bit about some major league guys before we kind of maybe hit on some of those individual minor leaguers. I'm curious, Ben and I have kind of wondered on those guys. The press conference to start the season, we're going to give them runway and everything, and I think a lot of us read that as, these guys are they're going to be in the majors, they're going to be in the lineup every day, and there certainly was an aspect of that, but as you mentioned, they're taking some time off maybe to do some work in the majors. And something Ben and I have started wondering is, is it possible that one or both of those guys, does, go down to the minors for a stint yet this season? And that's not a bad thing. That's not like a catastrophic thing. I don't know. What do you see going forward for them?
I do. I do think that we'll keep my guess would be, and of course, by the time this gets thrown out into the world, one of the guys will be demoted. But yeah. I don't think there's any time in the near future where either of those guys are going to get demoted. They don't have the pressure for it, right? The Cardinals' offense is operating as a team, which means that they can do what they're doing. They can, granted, I'm a big Thomas Saggese fan, but they can keep Nolan Gorman for specific roles, and then maybe when you're supposed to take him out of a game for a pinch hit, you can leave him in just to see how he does, to give him that chance, to show him that confidence. But I do think that we're seeing positive returns with Jordan Walker. We're seeing some positive returns from Nolan Gorman, and it's just about giving them a chance to balance it out and find their confidence level with the changes they're making, and their, whether it be mechanically or in their approach. So for me, as you know, as much as I would love to see Thomas Saggese get the run or the runway that Nolan Gorman has, because I do think that with the left-handed, right-handedness of it all, it almost makes more sense to have Thomas Saggese up here. And also, he's got probably a better contact tool. What Gorman's always going to struggle with is that strikeout rate. You guys were talking about it. I've heard you guys talk. When you strike out that much, and you've always struck out that much, unless you can completely change the hitter you are, you're going to strike out a lot. And that's the most dangerous thing that you can do at the major league level. That's how you're going to get yourself into the most trouble. So I do worry about Nolan a little bit more, but I don't see an immediate urgency to get either of them down as long as the team keeps performing how they're performing. And then again, continue to work with them. But, I'm open to anything. I don't know what they're going to do. I'm trying to be as reasonable as possible about it and as patient as possible about it. But I know I kind of got off topic there. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like with Jordan Walker, it seems like they are talking as much about pitch selection as about swing. And AAA pitchers, Ben and I live in a AAA town, so I don't mean this, to be horribly pejorative, but there's a lot of filler at the AAA level. Yeah. And if you want someone to be able to recognize Major League pitching, they need to recognize Major League pitching because you don't get it day in and day out in AAA. Now, that being said, with their recent demotions, Gorman and last year and then Walker the last couple of years, I mean, they haven't really put up, numbers in AAA that grab you by the lapels and make you think there's a big leaguer. And so I kind of wonder, has your view of what these two guys can be changed? And for a little bit of background of everyone, we've kind of been tossing around Jermaine Dye for Jordan Walker. Like, if he's Jermaine Dye, how happy would you be? And I am of the opinion I would be really happy.
Yeah.
But the way he's been talked about, I think that might seem like weird. You might be down on him if you throw around Jermaine Dye, but I don't feel that way at all. But so just kind of with that background for folks who may not be familiar with the way that we've talked about Jordan Walker in the past, when you look at him now, what do you think, is his most likely outcome and once he gets things figured out at the major league level, if he's even able to, I guess, do you even think he'll be able to get to that point?
I don't think he'll be able to ever reach some of the lofty expectations that they thrust on him. This last week has been an interesting case study in Jordan Walker and pitch selection, because he'll start having success with a refined pitch selection, and he almost gets like overconfident and starts reaching out of himself and starts reaching for that pitch. He'll hold off of it, start hammering the baseball, pitches that he can handle, and then he'll start extending again because he gets overconfident. He thinks that he's figured it out. So there's a discipline issue there, and that's not like a discipline issue. I don't want it to sound like he's undisciplined. He's not undisciplined, but that's always going to be his struggle, And because of that, because it's a tough right-handed swing, and the toughest thing to hit is the outside breaking pitch, he's going to ebb and flow. There's going to be ebbs and flow, and he's going to have to learn what level of confidence he can have in his ability to extend the refined approach, which is find a pitch on the inner half and the inner lower half to do some damage on. Be prepared to use your quick hands and your bat speed to get to the high pitch, high fastball, and just spit on that pitch as often as you can. He needs to be committed to that, and without knowing how committed he's going to be to that, it's just so tough to say. I do think that what we've seen so far these last couple of weeks is a return to the second half of 2022. We're sure he's going to strike out, but he knows what he's doing. Another thing, and I'm sure that the data, there's somebody out there who's got advanced data that I do not have, is it seems to me like, we're recording this on Wednesday night, I think. Who knows what night it is, whatever night it is. Yeah. And I'm watching the game. It's raining in Baltimore, and he's out in front of everything. Like, in a good way, not in a bad way. Like, you could tell that he's making contact at a better spot out in front of him. Now, maybe that's a dangerous slippery slope, especially if you're getting breaking pitches on the lower corner. But it just seems like he's getting himself in a better position to hit. So I guess the short of the long is I thought for sure I never thought he'd be Aaron Judge, right? I was always on on the fence about Jermaine Dye. I thought I would look at those stats and be like, man, that's like if you can get that would be amazing. But then you look at Jermaine Dye's WAR, and people would always bring up his WAR because he was a bad defender. And Ben, I know that you've talked about this before, but when we one time many years ago when we talked, I always wanted to see what Jordan Walker would look like in center because of the athleticism. And it's nice that he started to rebound defensively and right now that he's seasoned out there a little bit. But that also gives me hope that he's, with the changes he's made out in right as a defender in the outfield, that can carry over offensively. So all of that's just to say that I don't think he's ever going to be a 30 home run guy. I could end up eating that alive. I could be wrong about that. I don't know if I ever thought he was necessarily going to be a consistent 30 home run guy either. I think about the minor leaguer who would hit the ball to the opposite gap a lot and at 115 miles per hour off the bat, and get a double out of it, and then run into some inside pitches for a home run. So I don't think he's that. Without, again, I'm terrible at comps. I just trying to bust my brain a little bit to come up with something. I could see him being like a 20 home runs at his 23 home runs at his peak, 25 doubles at his peak, maybe get up to 30 here and there. And then at his pinnacle be 265, 350, and then a little whatever the slug ends up coming to be right in the 780 to 810 range for a couple of years if he commits to what he's doing now. So again, as I rant, one more thing, like somebody was in my DMs or my messages or whatever the other day, and they were like, if he's not a 20 home run guy, what a waste. What a and I'm just thinking, like, why do we even care about home runs with this guy right now at all? Let's get him hitting the ball on a line a little bit and just get him comfortable, and then we'll revisit the 20 home run thing. Just what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of people are like, Aaron Judge, 60 home runs. And that's an extreme example, right? But if you look at a guy, if he gets into that, that higher echelon of potential and taps into it, I mean, those home runs will come. If you hit the ball that hard, it's easy to see where that could come from, and he does.
Well, there was Kyle, I think I heard you make this comp years ago, Derek Lee, and that's one that I've always kind of thought with him as well. And in particular, I mean, obviously body type, big guy, hit the ball hard, but Derek Lee was also a guy who didn't hit a lot of home runs for most of his career, hit the ball more on the ground, more, line drives. But then had that like one season with the Cubs where he just like went nuts and hit like 40 bombs. So that's kind of almost what I've been hoping for Jordan Walker is like be a just solid put the ball and play hard Derek Lee kind of guy, playing a more plus defensive position as well. And then hopefully in 3-4 years we also get the like 40 home run season out of you. So
that's a good call. I did something smart and you allowed me to take credit for it. I'll take that. We did. No, I think ideally like that's where my mind still is after all these years.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, it bears mentioning, when you look at this team and the way the roster currently is, you can see why the word runway was being thrown around and why it was being used directly about Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker. Because this team, even with Ivan Herrera having an amazing start to the year, albeit being hurt, and with Wilson Contreras, they still need another power presence in the middle of that lineup. Like that 3 through 5 or 2 through 5, however you want to divvy it up. There's not, there isn't that guy where you're like, oh shit, look who's coming up. Like he could make this, a 3-run game with one swing. They don't really have that in the middle of the order this year.
Yeah, it's about banging. Well, if I just keep saying banging over, no, it's about banging a couple base hits in a row and hoping for the best, and then maybe trying to avoid whoever the hot hand is at the time, instead of being held prisoner by some big power.
Yeah. Well, as long as we're talking about power in the middle of the lineup, though, Ivan Herrera, holy shit. like I knew that he was a good hitter. Like I knew that he had skill as a hitter, but he is like a different guy. And it's, it's not like just he had a hot week. I look at him and I'm like, no, this is who this guy is. So two questions for you, Kyle, I think related to him. One, like, did you, how much of this did you see in there? And then I guess my secondary question is, I'm really curious about what they're going to do with him positionally down the road, because I feel like it's maybe already kind of starting to pressure them to find something other than catcher, just because they need that bat so much.
I think I'll answer the second question first. I feel like what we're seeing right now is Ivan Herrera's future. I think for the foreseeable future, as long as Wilson Contreras is playing first base, you will see Ivan Herrera catch 2 out of every 10 games and DH the rest, and then maybe get 1 day off in those 10 games. Like that's what's going to happen here until they can't do it anymore, or until he takes the next step in his defensive prowess. I did not think he'd be this bad of a defender. If I can, that would be the first thing I would say. And I've been holding out hope and holding out hope and holding out hope. It seems like somewhere along the lines he dealt with some shoulder stuff and now this knee thing, and that's kind of impaired his ability to use proper mechanics, especially popping. And that's why his arm strength is down from what it was in the minors. That's why his accuracy is down from when it was in the minors. Again, he's going to have to get healthy or whatever, because that's obviously a huge part of being a catcher. What also hurts him is, look, when you're in the minors, you can get away with being kind of a quiet, sweet kid, behind the plate. But when you get to the majors and you've got these boisterous veterans and people who are in control, you kind of have to be not the alpha, but you have to be in control as a catcher. You can't let them steamroll over you. And he's that wasn't really him. He's come into that a little bit more. He's kind of been the soft leader, the quiet leader, as opposed to the boisterous Pedro Baez running around crazy, loud, making everybody happy kind of mode. So I would say that defensively, I probably could not have been any more wrong. Offensively, I'll give myself a shout out. For a really long time, I was one of these people who was like, no, Ivan Herrera. What a jackass I am. Ivan Herrera is a top 100 prospect in baseball. I was vocal about it. I was loud about it. I was just not sure about the power. Again, he was young for the level. He's a month younger than Nolan Gorman. And he was always right at the level of Gorman. And what he was always so good at was a refined 2-strike approach, where he would just hammer the ball all over the place. And it wasn't like, little bloopers over a head, or it would be a line drive into an open space. And a lot of times it was right field. And then at the end of his time in AA, we saw him start to turn on some pitches that he could do damage with. And he was turning on pitches and doing damage. And I remember writing specifically, and it might have been at the end of 2021, and part of the reason I remember is somebody asked me recently what I had wrote, and I was like, I have no idea, fry me. And so they said it, but it was like in 2021, I was just like, if this guy ever learns how to reach in with his advanced approach and find that gap power, he has the potential to be a middle of the order bat. Now, I never thought, and I still don't think he's a 20 homer guy. I think you're talking about that, that sweet spot of like Jason Hayward between 13 and 18, but with a ton of doubles and a great at bat. For me, in one of those many, many comparisons I wrote years ago, I said that he's the Edgar Renteria of catchers. He's not that good defensively. But what he kind of is the Alan Craig of catchers. And I think that's what Ivan Herrera is. And I would say that I was close to that, but he's outpacing it.
Yeah, I mean, his defense certainly looks like Alan Craig at this point. I'll say that. So.
Yes. Yeah, let's get him out in the outfield and first base and see
Put
how
him in center. Yeah, center field,
base.
right?
Put him
yeah,
in
second base and center.
Oh my God! Now I have to have it. I have to have Ivan Herrera playing everywhere. I need it.
Oh man, Ben, I don't know. I know the one other major league. I feel like I may be dominating the questions here, but the one other guy I think that in terms of kind of prospect pedigree up at the major leagues, Liberatore, and I have to say, like, this is a guy that like I had really like given up on, and like vocally like this guy just doesn't have it. Like, yeah, probably some middle relief, but there's nothing else there. And I mean, it's a different guy this season.
He learned how to pitch. You know, I do know that the organization had a lot of helped him along the way, the new pitching brain trust. And I think you guys have talked about it. I know I've talked about it. I know my good friend Kareem has talked about it. Blake, like all of those guys have talked about it, and it was really simple. You have to continue to keep your fastball velocity late in the starts and use them as little as possible, both the fastball and the sinker. And luckily, his slider has taken such huge strides, which I don't think any of us at any point could have anticipated. He would flash it pretty good. The year the Cardinals traded for him in 2021, his first full season with the Cardinals. He would flash a good slider, and you'd say, I want to see more of it, but it was always that curveball. And his command of his changeup was trash. So to see him refine, adjust that slider, and go primary with it, and back off of the fastball and the sinker, but use it specifically against handedness, it's again. He went from not being able to pitch and being a guy who you thought, this could be a really good lefty reliever if he could max out his velocity, get up to 97, 98 with an interesting curve and then a fancy slider and then kind of an interesting changeup and not use his fastballs at all, maybe once a relief appearance, to what we're seeing now, which is understanding what his best stuff is and using it as often as possible.
Yeah, sometimes that back foot slider to righties has me thinking of Randy Johnson. I mean, sometimes it just looks like exactly what the big unit would do, and it's really fun to watch.
Yeah, I went back and I was looking at some of the GIFs from 2021, 2022 that I put out on Libertor. And I remember, for one, I was like, slider, gets a strikeout, strikes out the lefty. I'd like to see him throw the slider more. And it was not the same shape. Of course, we don't have the Savant data from then, but it's not the same shape. And it's actually trash. It's more of a cutter without the velocity. So he was lucky to get away with what he got away with back then. But yeah, that's a great observation. That thing moves. It moves late and it moves hard. And I love the back foot to the righty. Love it.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of, I think the thing I said repeatedly with Libertor was it was the Office Space consultants. What is it you say you do here? And that was when I was watching him pitch, I'd just be like what are you trying to do? Are you trying to use a fastball to set up a curveball? Are you trying to tunnel those? Are you trying to I don't know? It just seemed like he was just throwing shit at the wall.
Yeah, and messing around with the cutter a little bit probably helped him quite a bit to understand that. Oh wait, no, my fastballs are kind of trash. I have to get strong enough and I have to use my body right and in order to keep my velocity. I would say real fast, and I hadn't thought about it until right now, one of the other things that we've seen specifically with the new player development side of the business, the Cardinal business, is they have definitely put a new emphasis on biomechanics. And that kind of came through in the Post-Dispatcher article, but I know for a fact that really keying in on the biomechanical side in order to get more velocity, and that got talked about with Gordon Graceffo a little bit, but in order to get more velocity and do it in a healthy way, I think has been another key for some of the organizational success we've seen, even though the pitching stats organization-wide aren't particularly good because so many of their top pitching prospects are hurt.
Yeah, it's really fascinating the way that evaluation has gone, and Ben and I have talked about this, that it used to be you would go off of batting average and ERA and these things that are not a direct reflection of how a player necessarily performed, and now we have Savant and you're able to measure spin and velocity, but now it's even more direct where the biomechanical stuff, it's what they are doing with their body. The ball is even what the ball is doing is an indirect reflection of what they're doing. And now it's no. We know exactly where your body needs to be to do these things. And it's just been such a sea change in that area. And it just, I always think of, the Cardinals had the Cardinal Way book that everyone would talk about, right? And I'm just but all these other places, they've got chambers that they're putting sensors on your body. You know what I mean? Who cares about this book? You got to show them what to do with their body. It's wild.
Yeah, and that's the next frontier in baseball player development. And it's nice to see the Cardinals have joined the fray instead of the leather-bound book.
Yeah, the Kissel book.
Yeah,
if Schilt were still with us, he could hold it up and I'm not saying that there's not good information in there. I'm just saying, like, that's what it used to be, and it's just come so far. And it's great to see these hires, and then there's I think they're starting to feel confident in talking about what they're doing and the results that they're generating, and it's still quite early in the year. And the old regime pitching draft and development hangover might not be as bad as Ben and I feared that it was going to be. Whereas oh, hey, maybe in 2 or 3 years we might have some good pitchers. But I think that they've done really good work so far this year. Even with Miles Michaelis.
I was going to say, eventually we have to talk about Miles Michaelis. I owe that, even though we got rocked tonight, I owe him an apology for all the hate and missiles and astronaut-themed items I was willing to give to him to send him into outer space. And I like that you guys have kind of been defending him because he deserves it. He's pitched out of his mind. It is funny, the Cardinals, all of the Cardinals' success right now seems to be this amazing combination of the leather-bound George Kissel Cardinal way and accepting the new frontier. And it just ties in perfectly with the draft and how important it is to be willing to adjust to new technologies without getting lost with what will make everybody win, which is good pitching and good defense and smart base running and making fewer mistakes than everybody in a game laden with mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, should we move on to maybe some guys in the minors?
Yeah.
Well, so I guess to kick that off, and we talked a little bit about Herrera, but Kyle, something I've been thinking about, just looking at the prospects that seem to really be shining in the minor leagues. Often when someone has a breakup of a long-term relationship, they might go out and just get involved with a lot of new people trying to find something that works. And I'm wondering, are the Cardinals doing that with catchers? Because every interesting minor league prospect they have is a catcher.
I think so. I think at first they were ready to be in a long-term relationship. And then when they realized that it was never going to be, your former betrothed, they were like, all right, let's bring them all in. Let's go clubbing.
So you're out at the club. Jimmy Crooks is there. Leonardo Bernal is there. Raniel Rodriguez is there. These all look like these are potential legit major league players to me. How do you sort of separate these guys out, and how do the Cardinals ultimately separate these guys out? Not that they have to do it immediately. Obviously, those guys are at 3 different levels, but what does that outlook look like?
Well, it's funny because I think in some ways they're kind of in the same position that they were with Carson Kelly and Andrew Kisner and Ivan Herrera. Raniel's kind of in Ivan's spot. Not talent-wise. I'm just saying from a timeline standpoint. I probably should preface that because the next thing I'm going to say is Leo Bernal's kind of in Andrew Kisner's spot, and I don't want that to become a thing. And then, Jimmy Crooks is kind of in the Carson Kelly spot. AAA knocking at the door, shows a lot of really promising traits. So what I would say, if I had to bang one of them, Ben, since that's what you're asking, I would I don't know. I think they're in a really good spot right now. We've seen them right now, and I know it's part of fan consternation. They have 3 catchers on the roster, right? They have Joel Pozo, and then they have Ivan Herrera and Pedro Paez. And maybe they have too many catchers. Maybe they're not using the right-handed bat catcher off the bench enough. I don't know. But what I know is the catching position is the toughest position to develop. It's the toughest position to have carried over success from the minors to the majors. It's the hardest position, in my opinion, in all of sports to play. And you just never know where it's going to go. Even now, as the Major League Draft is on the cusp of happening, really close at least, the catching position is the toughest position to draft and have success with. It is, other than high school pitching, high velocity high school pitching, it's almost impossible to guess right on whichever catcher is going to be drafted and end up making a major league impact. So I think what the Cardinals have is good. I don't know what's going to happen. I think Leonardo Bernal has taken huge steps defensively, which was his big question, and I think he's starting to tap into his power and use the field similarly to what we saw Ivan Herrera do at AA when he was at AA, getting overshadowed by other catchers and other prospects, kind of like Bernal is a little bit now. I think, I'll get to Rodriguez in a second because he's a whole different beast. That's a whole different monster down there. But Crooks is more in that Carson Kelly spot where, okay, we know that this guy is going to be a major league caliber catcher. Sure, he's going to have some bad days, and it might take him 10 years in playing for the Chicago Cubs to end up being the best version of himself. But that's a major league catcher who hits line drives all over the place and runs into some real power, and who pitchers at the minor league level love throwing to. Like, they love him. They love him in a similar way to the way the Cardinal staff loves throwing to Pedro Pages. The best thing that they have is time, and they have those guys spaced off a little bit. And they have the benefit of not having to make a split-second decision on any of the guys at the major league level. There's not a contract running out. They can be patient with Pages. They can be patient with Pozo. They can be patient with Herrera, and let the rest of itself be sorted out. So for me, I love Leonardo Bernal. I will throw it out there. I think Leonardo Bernal is something special. I think that as I watch him develop at AA, I think, all right, no, this is a major leaguer who, if he continues to develop defensively and without knowing exactly how he handles pitching staffs, like, this is the catcher of the future if I had to pick one. I think he's, I have my doubts about how his right-handed swing and his right-handed approach. I think his left-handed approach is further ahead than his right-handed approach. But I think we see him continue to make steps in every direction as a 21-year-old or 22-year-old at AA, whatever he is now. So of those three, like, that, if I was forced to pick one, he would be the one, with no disrespect to Jimmy Crooks, who I think could probably be a Pedro Pages. I mean this, like, a Pedro Pages level backup catcher right now with the major leagues. Hit 240 or 230, have a couple home runs, a couple extra bases, and hold up the pitching staff. So that's those two. And if you want me to hold off on the Rainiel Ray Rodriguez of it all, I can, or I can keep ranting. I'll leave it up to you guys.
Well, I'm definitely interested to hear about Rodriguez as well. But Ben, I don't know if you had anything on Crooks or Bernal before we jump into that.
Oh no, I think that's very interesting. And with Crooks, it's been very interesting to me with Crooks, because I think that he feels like he's always been the more polished, like, all around, like, catcher, and also first in line, almost like the older brother or something, But, like, when you look at these lower levels, I think I'm with you, Kyle, where there's some enticing talent down there that you feel like it could really pop. And that's just the way that it feels. And it's quite the logjam. I mean, you look at the years of control just with Pages and Herrera, and how do you fit these guys into the system? How do you do that? And it's very fascinating to think about. So, but what do you see with when we go down perhaps a little bit further on the ladder in the org with catcher?
Yeah, before we get too far away, I do want to point out that they should sign Joel Pozo to a 20-year contract. And they should trade Pedro Pages and Ivan Herrera and Wilson Contreras, and just let Joel Pozo be kind of chunky and delightful. I don't know why that's not being talked about more. I don't get why he's not getting more time. I love Joel Pozo. I love his shape, and that's all. That's enough for me.
He would have been an amazing backup for Yadier Molina, especially in the late years. It would have been almost like a WWE tag team where they're like the chunky catchers, and it would have been really enjoyable.
Yes, yeah. He is. All these years, we finally have Yadi's backup, and it's gone.
Yep.
It's wasted.
I already liked Pozo, and then a week or two ago, when I heard that he had one walk and one strikeout, I was like, game on. Like, this is my guy.
yeah. Ben, I don't know if it matters. You're kind of drowned out a little bit. I don't know. Again, who am I? I'm the producer of the show today. No. To your question about, like, further down the line, I think that the Cardinals organization would, and they love their catching depth, but I think the two guys that they would also recommend get mentioned specifically are Ryan Campos, their 4th-round draft pick last year, who's kind of a contact. He's going to need he doesn't hit the ball hard enough, and he still puts the ball on the ground too much. So he needs a lot of luck in his profile, but they're working on it. But he's a really great, again, field general, Really strong arm, although to me it seems like it's taken a step back. Um, they love him, and the players love him, and he's just one of those guys. Again, the Pedro Pajes, Jimmy Crooks type. He's just that type of personality person, although they all do it in their own way. So that's another person. But, then we do have to get into the Rainiel, Ray Rodriguez of it all. And again, I don't want to blow past Sammy Hernandez and some of the other interesting catchers, but Rainiel Rodriguez is a whole different beast. Now, I guess a lot of people don't realize this about Rainiel, and it's something that I learned this offseason, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I used to be on top of this stuff, but Rainiel is actually from Pennsylvania. He's been in Pennsylvania for a good part of his life, and then he went back down to the Dominican to sign as an international free agent.
Okay.
And I think it's important context, because somebody who played stateside this much, it actually makes more sense why he might be crushing at the minor league level. Now, when you take a step back and you go back to 2022 or 2023 when he was getting scouted by Perfect Game, even before I started asking around about him, there was always this potential for him to be, the catching of it all, but to be like a power bat with real power upside that could actually be a top 100 prospect in baseball, if not more than that. It's just circumstances kind of forced him to make a decision, and he made a decision. The other interesting, before we get into his profile or anything, the other interesting thing is as he starts hammering these baseballs and starts hitting a home run in every at bat or whatever he's doing now, I went back and I was like, hey, I asked people who would know. Luckily, I have a few connections here and there between the scouting industry as a secondary market and then some people and organizations that I've been fortunate enough to meet, And I talked to 7 different people in the scouting world that their jobs depend on this. And what I was told is if he would have stayed in this draft, because this would have been his draft, he would have been a top 30 draft pick this year. And that's based on the development that he's made in the Cardinals organization. So there's no guarantee that had he stayed in Pennsylvania, that he would have continued on that track. But based on what these people who know that this is their livelihood, I asked 7. I had somebody tell me he'd be a top 8 pick. I had 2 others tell me top 25, and everybody else, except for the one guy who said probably top 30, everybody else was like probably top 20 in this, what is kind of a crap draft, if we can be quite honest. It's a jumbled draft. It's not crap. It's kind of jumbled. So I think that's important context that the Cardinals were able to spend $300,000 on a guy that they had already scouted stateside, made connections with stateside a little there, and were able to bring him into the organization. He is a true prospect. There's pedigree here on a couple different levels. So he is worth getting excited about. His complex league stats don't matter at all. They're awesome, but they do not matter at all yet. Let's see what it looks like in Palm Beach when he gets there, probably in the next month or so, I would suspect. But he's an interesting kid.
Yeah, I had actually heard you say that on the podcast with Brian Walton, which, by the way, Kyle, I'm loving that. I'm loving hearing you every week on there. You two, I think, have a great dynamic. But yeah, when you tell me that they, sniped, what would have been a top 30 or top 20 prospect, that warms my heart.
Yeah, yeah, and truth be told, with the international scouting side having so much trouble contributing to the major league level, it's only really Ivan Herrera, and it's nice that they're getting a win right now.
Yeah.
Hashtag Mo knows.
Yes.
Right? Well, it's a throwback to like the early to maybe mid 2000s when they were a little bit ahead on player analysis, and so we just regularly for a time there had Matt Carpenters and had guys that they made a lot of really smart acquisitions later on in the draft, and so and of course everybody eventually kind of caught up and was looking at more or less the same numbers, and it seems like that edge had gone away, so this was definitely a nice throwback to that kind of thing.
Yeah, and every indication is that his bat will have staying power. Initially he was listed 5'10". I had no idea how tall he was. Brian Walton said that the 5'8" that he's been relisted as is accurate, but it's a big, quick swing that is not off balance in any capacity. He gets direct to the ball. The bat path is not troublesome in a wavy kind of way. Like that bat is for real. His mechanics are for real. He's gonna get challenged. We'll see how he does when he gets challenged. But my understanding is that his ability to understand, he has great in zone swing decisions. He has really great out of zone swing decisions. He can poke the ball to the right side if he needs to. Against inferior talent. So the question just becomes, can he stay at catcher? Being short kind of limits what his next step might be. As terrible as that sounds. I'm under the impression, and again, I have not seen it other than in clips or video that I've seen from backfields that people have sent me. I get the impression that he isn't the most fleet of foot, but he might be, like, if he ended up moving, he might be able to move to second. He could probably play a little bit of third. So that's worth keeping in mind. Every indication is that he has the raw tools to stay behind the plate. It's just that will take a lot of time and a lot of development. So I guess if his bat gets way ahead of his defense, which it appears to be now, and part of the reason why he's still at the complex is they want to continue to work on him defensively. Part of why they haven't moved him to Palm Beach yet. But if the bat gets ahead, then I would not be surprised if, especially with the catching depth in the organization, like we've talked about, if they decide to make a decision to move him, and where they move him and how they move him is going to be the fascinating thing to watch.
Ben, I don't know. Are there other guys kind of in the minors that you have been wondering about, or?
Where do you think McGreevy will be next year?
Oh, he's got to be in the starting rotation, right? Like the Cardinals starting rotation. It's a great question. So we know for sure. Well, I guess we don't know for sure. We'd be surprised if we had any other outcome than if Steven Matz and Miles Michaelis were on different teams. I guess anything could happen. Who knows? Maybe you bring him back on a 1-year deal.
I don't know if Miles Michaelis will be on a different team. I'm seeing like some kind of like low level reality show, yes. Where like Florida boat owners like fight each other. I think that's where I see him going. So.
One of us has to have a connection with a Hollywood producer, and that's something I'm willing to pitch. I will put together a whole pamphlet because that is a brilliant idea.
I don't think we need a Hollywood producer. I think like a Sarasota producer would do for the kind of show where he's headed. So.
But yeah, look, if he's either, again, there's no signs that he'll ever be hurt. He seems to have an elastic arm. He pitches 150 minor league innings consistently. In his start, like it was a 6th inning, he's still throwing 93 miles an hour, and he averages 94 on his fastball throughout the year. So I don't see any reason why he'd get hurt, but you just don't know how arms are. So yeah, he has to be in the Cardinals rotation. Just has to be. Especially for 2 reasons. One, because we're still in the rebuild, or whatever the hell you want to call it. They're still in that. They still need to find out about these guys, and he's one of the guys that they'll need to find out about it. But also he's cost control. And costs very little money, and if they are intent on adding to a contender, if the Cardinals continue to be contenders, then every little bit of dollars that they can save will be a dollar that they can save. And that's all I'm going to say, because I was going to say they could spend it, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
We'll see how the FanDuel Midwest subscription base is before they start signing any free agents.
Oh, man. I hadn't thought about that. Have they released any numbers at all about subscriptions? Have you guys seen it? I didn't think about that until right now.
No, but I've seen a whole lot of people who got the app, the FanDuel app itself, who are not happy with it at all. Yeah. I subscribe through Amazon, and I think it's fine. The biggest problem is sometimes the audio gets ahead of the video, but you just go out of the game, and you can just pick back up where you left off, and it's fine. But a lot of people who got like the FanDuel, who subscribed directly through FanDuel, appear to be pretty unhappy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the one downside of the fact that they're, all these major league organizations are so secretive about their finances is, when they actually are losing money, and it's hard to. It's hard to know how much stock to put in that, right?
Yeah.
And obviously, there's fewer people at the ball games, and obviously the whole kind of cable subscription model has changed. So I legitimately believe there's been major changes to their revenue streams, but without the transparency before or after, it's hard to know. But
yeah, they're asking for the criticism without transparency.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Any other, just I guess, in terms of the minor league pitching, I mean, McGreevy is the one guy, both with kind of how advanced he is and with health. He kind of seems like really the only guy in the minor leagues who, might kind of come up and make an impact in St. Louis. Is there anybody I'm missing? And if not, Matthews is definitely somebody I'm excited about, and I think seeing that he wasn't dealing with like a serious injury has me hopeful that maybe he's still on track to see a debut later this year. But I don't know, like him or anybody else that you think we see making an impact anytime soon from the pitching side.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess with Quinn. They were really concerned. They were really concerned with the shoulder soreness, as you should be with any type of shoulder soreness. But he seems to have come back from it without any issues. At least he's playing it off that it's no issue. You don't really know with him because he's such a competitor. But there's been no signs in any of his abbreviated rehab starts that would indicate that he is dealing with any type of soreness or any type of decline in velocity or anything. So all systems a go. I bet we get one more rehab start, and he'll probably be at Memphis after that, even if they don't fast track him for his next appearance. So I do still think that Quinn Matthews as a St. Louis Cardinal is on the table for this year. Just to go over it one more time, like everybody's hurt. Cooper Jerpy, Brian Holiday, Bryson Mounts just got hurt. It's like, Chen Wei Lin just started pitching again. Off of his minor league rehab. It's been terrible. It's been really Michael McGreevy, Pete Hansen, who probably isn't a major league anything, maybe a spot starter, maybe he gets a taste of the majors without getting extra velocity. Although he's doing kind of the Pete Hansen, the Cardinals' former third-round draft pick from like 2022, a lefty out of Texas. He's doing the thing that Michael McGreevy's doing and having a ton of success, which is not using his trash fastball, trying to get more out of it, but then just going to all of his breaking stuff, and his breaking stuff's pretty nasty to both lefties and righties at the AA level. So maybe there's more to it than that. But it's just been Eshawn Henderson, who is at AA, he spells his name IXAN. His parents spell his name IXAN.
So the traditional way is what you're saying.
Yes, yeah, the regular way, the way that everybody does. So he's kind of, again, the soft tossing lefty. He just throws with a lot of deception and mixes stuff up really well. And again, his fastball velocity is 93-ish. So it's just a matter of like how that all progresses. But no, like I think that really where they'll, and of course Sokoa Roby, who's managed to stay healthy and also pitch out of his mind so far at AA. I would think that in the next month we'll see him at AAA. But I also would not put the pressure on Sokoa Roby to make a major league debut this year unless he's one of the extra two bodies that are brought up, pitches out of the bullpen in September or something like that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's like the guys that I'm interested in most to see potentially make a major league debut is someone like Andre Granillo, a relief pitcher. I think he was drafted in like the 14th round of 2019. He throws a massive slider. It is a nasty pitch. And his fastball is in the high 90s, 96, 97, 95 range. And both of those pitches can get righties out without an issue. But he started to throw his changeup a little bit more, and his location is better with his slider and his fastball, his four-seamer, against lefties. And he's been terrible against lefties until this year. And incorporating the changeup, having better command of a really good changeup, and better command of his slider and fastball have really helped him. I mean, I don't think lefties might have one extra base hit or two extra base hits off of him. No home runs. The only home run he let up was off of a righty. So, like, that's actually a really interesting name to keep an eye on, because I do think Andre Granillo will make a major league debut this year. He'll be added to the 40-man eventually. It's not like they don't have waste on there that they can just dump. And, I think that he could actually end up being a pretty important part of the Cardinals bullpen down the stretch, which is good because they've got some guys, and we've seen positive returns so far after rough returns at first with Ryan Fernandez. And again, that's to tie in the whole podcast. We've seen him start to change things, start to adjust, start to see different specs a little bit here and there on his fastball and his slider. So he'll get his chance at the major league level again, and we'll see how the development side of both himself and the Cardinals development staff have brought out the most of him. But, the pitching depth in the organization has really, really taken a hit, and it's been nice to see, minus Markevian Hentz, who has struggled so far in both of his his appearances. It's been nice to see, like, again, Chen Wei-Len, the big 6'7" in Peoria, have some successes coming off the IL, and Quinn Matthews start to put it back together. Although his command is still wonky, so I'm anxious to see how it goes at AAA.
Yeah. All right, awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear about some potential bullpen arms too. That's one of those things you can just never have enough of those guys, and I think we all know the guys that are performing now are not necessarily going to be the guys that'll be performing well in August and September, and you need the churn there. But Kyle, I think we've had you for an hour now, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Ben, anything else before we let Kyle get going?
No, I think we've covered most of my questions. I am kind of wondering, when do you think Weatherholt makes it to the majors, and where do they play him?
Well, he's mostly played short. He's played a little bit of second. So I do think that right now, mentally, they're probably, even though they've got layers and layers of second basemen in the organization, I think mentally that's kind of where that they have him. I know that they believe in him as a third baseman. I at least when they drafted him, they didn't have any concern that he'd be able to play third. I think that that's probably the position that makes the most sense when you look at the timeline, maybe. But I still maintain that when he gets to AAA, I want to see him play all over the place. If he's not going to be a primary shortstop, I still want him to get reps at short. But I want to maybe this is what I do when I come on with you guys, but I want to see our top prospect in center field. I want to see what that looks like. I want to see what he looks like at third. I want him to get reps there. Brendan Donovan plays a pretty good defensive first base. Why not get him some reps at first just to see if he can take a couple at bats in a game if you need him there? Like, he's athletic enough. He's a shortstop. He's an average-ish minor league shortstop. He does some weird things here and there, and he probably can't be more than average at the major league level. But he's athletic enough that he can play anywhere else. There's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of getting the reps. And he's a high baseball IQ guy. He's a rat, like they like to say. So I would think that what you're talking about, Ben, from a time frame is, depending on what they do this offseason, I think that they'll do everything they can to try to get him on the roster on opening day next year. They'll give him every opportunity to make that. Hopefully by July or August, he's hitting well enough and he's healthy enough that he's getting reps all over the place at AAA, which would set him up for a debut in early 2026. Maybe May, or barring any type of injury or trades with Gorman or Sajasi or Arenado, or my brother Scott calls him Arendando. And now I live with Scott, so he's Nolan Arendando from here on out. And aside from that, like, I do think one way or the other he's going to be knocking on the door come May, June of 2026. Even if his pull power doesn't develop, I think that the Cardinals love him. I think that that's what they would want. So I'll say by June of 2026 he'll be at the major league level.
Well, that's exciting. Yeah. The little bit I've seen him, he's definitely one of those guys that you're just like, yep, that's a Major League Baseball player. No question.
Yeah, he has a baseline of Brendan Donovan's work ethic and his ability to just be whatever he can be in the field. And it's just a matter of how that bat continues to develop.
Yeah. Hey, the Dodgers have built their entire team out of second baseman for the last 10 years, and it's worked out pretty well for them.
Yeah. Padres and shortstops, too, right? The Padres are just a team full of shortstops.
Yeah. Good point. So, all right. Well, Kyle, hey, thank you so much. We just love talking to you, and you bring so much knowledge as well. So it's always a pleasure when you're able to have the time to join us. I know you're on, I think, about 12 podcasts every week, and so we appreciate all the time you put in sharing all that knowledge with all of us.
It's my pleasure, guys. Of all the podcasts I listen to, you and, of course, Meet Me at Mutual are the two that are my favorite. So it's always an honor to be on here with you guys.
Oh, well,
thank you so much. That's very flattering.
Yeah, especially because Ben and I are just pulling shit out of our ass. We don't really know what we're talking about at all. So I really appreciate that.
Hey, look, that's my thing. I have not said one honest thing tonight to anybody.
Oh, we know better than that. So. All right, man. Well, hey, thank you as always, and thanks to everybody for listening. Ben and I will be back with you on the next Cardinals Off Day.
Go, go,